Yes, good afternoon. It's Lynn again. I was just wanting to get back to you and make some explanations in a further regard about that short blurb that I left to you on some of the social media channels with regard to the interferences that everybody, I think, is pretty much very aware of that go on the internet, and they started off, in the years ago with some little viruses, malware, this, that, spyware. But as programs get more sophisticated and technologies become more sophisticated, AI and things, and the internet becomes more congested, and that there's some things that I would like to remind everybody of, regardless of that, as far as spam criteria, extortion, etc., fraud, bank theft, you name it, preferentials, cartels, it doesn't matter what it is or what it applies to the internet as well. I would say, that's a question, maybe there's a level of some discussion, legal, oh boy, we'll get the people in to spend some time. Let's not do too long a study, but hell, laws of the land, laws of the sea, is it a conjecture in terms of where it is, or is it a combined signal, or are we just going to call it laws of the airwaves, or are we under separate airwave jurisdictions under the law of the land, and do you share that, and what happens if it gets lost at sea? However, back to the thing's a little more serious and a little less silly. Nonetheless, as far as all those things that I mentioned, as far as ethics, professional criteria, conflicts of interest, contracts is basically of obligatories as far as certain protocols or restrictions under public office, media, etc., they still apply whether they're on paper or if they're on the street or through the newspaper or a phone call, if it's on the internet as well. However, period, don't forget, it's a big, very confusing, muddled jungle out there, and all it is really little sparkety sparks of electricity. As well as that, for the people that are really, really sophisticated, and I would say there is a very regular commonality of a certain group of select as far as corporations and groups, that as far as percentage of shares held interrelatedly, kind of all around in one big, it just makes sense as far as spreading the money around, but keeping it in a close group so that things kind of happen as a result of due course for obvious reasons. We'll leave it at that. But the thing about it is, you have a common denominator, primarily of publicly traded companies. The obligation to make more and more profits. And then you have criteria, and of course, getting that edge in the competition, and the ability out on the internet with algorithms, spyware, and preferential, and screening, and the like of that. That, as I say, when I was out doing some things by the law, legally, within all criteria as requested, as far as drawing some issues with regard to some very important criteria, respectfully and politely communicating with some politicians, large corporations, and that initially was something that was a very much of a concern, on the very much concern from a horse's mouth as far as the source of some things, and actually what mRNA vaccinations are. They are not a vaccination, and essentially it's not very nice what they are, but they are basically primarily an effective design to create a condition, a physical condition in the body, which is the equivalent of an ongoing deteriorative chronic viral condition, period, and a distortion. But we'll leave it at that. But obviously, when you send that out and you basically validate it and have a quote from academics, Nobel Peace Prize winners, relevant to the criteria of showing that all these scams or misrepresentations are going on, and there's no reply, and then you go on to some other things. And obviously, as far as the stall and the interferences progressively more and more over time, as I basically kept doing these things and exposing as far as group collective paranoid reaction, when all of a sudden I had a report from the authorities, you better stop sending out those emails because all of a sudden everybody's already really getting ready to clobber you. At that point, thank you very much for the heads up, officer. Because I was actually throwing some quotes out about a former RCMP officer that had done some investigating on the internet, and we had mutually aligned as far as the opinions on the facts and criteria and numerous other supportive things from ethical people. However, things went on, so at that point I just realized, well, these people are random all over the place and they wouldn't, but all of a sudden they've all got together and they collectively decided they're going to, okay, then they're keeping the story straight, and they think it would be a good idea to tell me to shut up because obviously I hit the nail on the head. They don't want to talk about it, and it is what it is. What's up? So one thing goes on to the other, and over the course of 2 or 3 years and stuff, well, there was the thefts of my phone and a whole bunch of other things. But by that time, I was so complicit and confused in that and misrepresented and obligatory arrest criteria under certain other mental health dictates that the police were obligated to arrest me, make these claims that were misrepresentative, that victimized them to look like they were complicit in the cover-up of the theft of my phone, when obviously they had to, and they were basically making it all up because they were forced to by other things to help cover up the facts. But nonetheless, they tried to be fair, and they have been supportive as best they can under the iron hand of some of those criteria that I tend to agree with, as far as why is the truth not allowed to be brought out forthcoming and cross-reference for a discussion on something, the fact that substantiated by from horse's mouth that it was what it was. However, things went on from there to the next, and 4 consecutive email apps get violated and made useless, and I saw some things about how somebody had figured out some thing to basically go in against a highly encrypted secure email site that I googled that was out of Switzerland. It was state-of-the-art. A lot of securities and people used it, but all of a sudden tags and jump-ins, and I read, oh, is that going to happen? And sure enough, 2 or 3 days later, wham bam, within about 3.5 to 4 minutes and 15 seconds usually, I'd be on preparing an email, and all of a sudden the drilling and the interference and the slowdowns and the mucky-muck started. So, and that happened with 4 consecutive emails. I kept reporting these things, but nobody could do nothing. Nobody gets back. And on and gone. And then I start going into this thing about the graphene aspects and 5G and how it's electrically psychoactive, and how these graphenes and those vaccinations actually end up in the brain, and all basic microwave theories, a whole bunch of things, solfeggio frequencies, blah, 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 about mind control and make you feel good, make you feel bad, and a whole bunch of other things, which I kept reporting. And as these interferences would come up, I'd do an analytics on it and some of the things that I do, and kind of walk through it for like a swinging door, and it kind of got up to the excesses yesterday. As mentioned, when I was out trying to make some contacts with regard to contacting some people that I do respect as far as their talents and guess their moral structure, and gosh darn, this does not apply to the men, but don't be offended, but I'm not that kind of a girl anyways. But, well, yes, very attractive, very intelligent women who basically are taking an approach with regard to the presentation of their art at present, as far as in music and that, in a matter I very much respect, and others that have been in industries with regard to entertainment, but in the aftermath and where they've gone is segued or basically taken a walk and is always staying real and things, well, at the same time in other industries that have been less respectful to women and things, but at the same time, for the same reason, a respectful regard, because I truly respect them on them being honest and real, and have shown some merits over time on the opinions of others that, gosh darn, they're darn respectable gals, and the kind, for obvious reasons, me being single, well, dare I say, in that case, and they're single, at that point, at least I'm not going to get in trouble with a jealous wife for being angry that I might be going out and engaging in conversation primarily for business and an open mind, but at the same time pragmatically and realistically, but on the basis of synergies that whatever, some song lyrics or this or that, and the litany of things that I've been in and very well connected in very high ethical regards with very ethical people out in business in a litany of sciences, blither blather, and a whole bunch of other things. And over that course of time, the reason I've contacted and been familiar and kept on a friendly basis and a welcome basis as far as contact, intelligent conversation, is on an ethical merit and stuff, blah, 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 blah. About a couple of days ago, when all of a sudden, as mentioned, I was out and, well, obviously, I was out on Instagram and I thought, well, heck, I got this silly character representation about the Tenner's Flea Stud, because I'm a farm boy and, Tennessee Ernie Ford, he was kind of the Bruce the Boss of my parents' generation. Fair enough? The working man, the seeing the real. So what the heck? And as well as that, I know which end of a horse is from the other. And sometimes, but coming from this is the horse's mouth, what you're hearing here on me, I don't mind acting like a little bit of a horse's ass at times for the sake of a good laugh, but please take me seriously. There's nothing that I say is ever that's intended or will ever be in the context of what comes back from the back end of a bull in rather extreme or bovine proportions. Fair enough? A little bit from the back end of a horse, well, that's just kind of a silly ha-ha. It's just like just old farm boys doing things when they're sitting around and they figure, what the heck, may as well have a laugh, but at somebody's expense, usually your own, or somebody's in the way that it's not going to hurt anybody, and certainly not going to basically hurt them in any regard, other than, hey, boy, did he get taken on that one, and at that point, but I mean, there was nothing that was misleading or would hurt, so it certainly wasn't that mean, ugly back end of the bull kind of thing that has no respect for others and hurt or whatever, or rather provocative or damaging things with regard to their actual moral conduct or what they do or don't do behind closed doors and whatever, but in the opinions that come from a horse's mouth as opposed to the he says and the she says, and a group that kind of gets together and it becomes the group mentality that, well, if enough people, you tell enough lies for long enough, you make it sense of it really, and people tend to enjoy believing it or repeating it because it's really good gossip, and boy, this sounds like really good gossip, so we'll make it the truth, just for what, and devoid of what it does as far as the reputation of me or market share, or pretty girls or respectable gentlemen out there in business and that possibly in the wrong say-so out in political circles, the bad yeah, and all of a sudden, maybe $500 million, maybe several $1 billion is out the door overnight on the sake of the old self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, for example, just a simple, and you've seen it numerous times over the years, all of a sudden, big guy just drops billions and billions into Bitcoin. And what's the reaction on the news? Oh gosh, well, that guy really must know something. Yeah, he knows that if it goes out in the news, which the leak was, that everybody's going to think there's something up, and it creates a big news story in the self-fulfilling prophecy. Everybody runs in and goes into Bitcoin, and it takes off on the run. And the news watches, and remember the guy that dropped the several billion in from his advisors, and they kind of, things are getting against the load and the adjacent equitable savings and margins against the studies. I think we better just kind of politely side sell out. I mean, we're not going to be so stupid. That's enough and walk out, because then there'd be a big sale out and they'd say it was a scam, or what the heck is that done there for that guy? So they kind of side sell and they stay quiet, and all of a sudden we heard that so-and-so, what? And then it's confirmed. Yeah, I did, on the sensible advice of my people, because the reaction when the news got a hold of it that I was into it and that, which I didn't encourage, but I wasn't going to hurt because it sure made the prices go up. I and my fella, we just kind of pulled out in a sensible thing that there was no way that the run was going to last forever. And they'd get out, maybe 8 or 9 points before the peak rise, and then all of a sudden, boom, bam, and everybody's down to nothing again. In the meantime, those guys have netted and checked out, have their cash, and Oh, Jesus, they're all that cheap Bitcoin laying around. Well, I guess we'll pick up a few, put it there, and keep it in case we want to do it all over again, which is realistically happening right now. But I do tip my hat to a few of the more ethical large guys and privately held business guys, but I do tip my hat most notably to some that I do respect long term who was in on one of those, but it was just one of those things that he did to see what happened, and it happened, but he's not going for that gig right now because, as I mentioned to a gentleman who was trying to encourage me, I said, look, it's going to be a wild bull ride when it takes off again, which it will, and it's showing all those sputterings right now. But the thing about it is, in my opinion, even if I had a few $100, it'd be tempting, but just on the ethics and the morals of the thing, as far as my conscience, the drop in, yeah, it's easy to make money when you're running with the obvious whale when it basically goes for a dive and goes for a big meal. But, it's an easy way to catch a free lunch or whatever, but at the same time, I really don't wish to be participant. That's just an obvious setup to take the majority of the little guys for the cleaners when they're looking for an opportunity on a shiny object thing in a desperation marketplace where they're trying to relocate their money in a sure thing. And they're going to end up basically left wiped out pretty much in the overall end on this wild bull ride. It's going to be whoop, and all gone again. And you see these patterns recur over time. And yes, I read the securities manual stock market thing when I was about 19 or 20, and I went, well, fine, blah, blah, been there, got that, but this is pretty boring sitting around and you can only recommend what the guys behind you tell you instead of being able to really go out and make some recommendations. I just went off into other things, but I kept it with me. I know it, but at any rate, I was just going to say that a couple of days ago when I put that feed out, I do apologize in the most notable regard because I was, well, my lord, I was just so exasperated. I thought, my gosh, yeah, well, let's face it, I was a little more agitated. I watched me today. I didn't watch the video the other day, but boy, I was sure twitchy and this, that, and the next thing. But it wasn't because I was a nervous wreck or that. It was just, I was just exasperated. Like, how can people not be so obviously obvious in terms of all these things that have happened collectively over time to that group emails and all that stuff that everybody's looking the other way, or oh my God, or is everybody in on it that they don't know what to do about it? But essentially, I know what I'm going to do with it with regard to moral compass, and that is just to say, once again, as far as social media, if you're wishing to contact somebody, whether it's on email or social media or whatever, no matter how much they claim, well, this is so specially encrypted and so secured that never, you can be sure. But the thing about it is, folks, it's just as obvious as when you're setting up a new password and all of a sudden, hey, you need a really difficult password and complicated and nobody will ever figure out. Here, try this one. No one will know. Yeah, but the person that just supplied it certainly is. Oh, well, we say we can't, but how do you know? Because they probably have some complicated password you can't get in to double check to see if they really do or don't know. And as well as that, as far as encryption, again, these people that offer these encryptions, well, whoever you get that, well, they offer the system. They probably realistically know how to get in. And on some basic things from an approximate insight about encryption, well, if you really know the truth of it, it is only a momentary inconvenience to get through any of it, period. And that is the truth. But, as I say, somebody was trying to figure it out, but they got it down to about 3.5, 4 minutes back then on a very sophisticated encryption site out of, what was it called? Proton.me out of Switzerland. I highly recommend the service. It is a most exceptional group. And as far as the support and the help and the backup, I tip my hat. Second to none as far as email apps. However, I kind of timed out and I didn't have the spare $70 to renew it and kind of buy some extra time. But essentially at that point, it was pretty much corrupted and it was useless. And they figured there was one slight opening where it was an oops, and sure enough, the tag in the tail But I went into a new one, and I hopped over to DuckDuckGo just for the sake of it. Because I figured while they're watching, it goes out in the email, they can backtrack, so I'll just use any of the other ones. But I went out to DuckDuckGo to do a search in a Google. Hey, did you realize there's 5 or 6 tags and guys chasing? And I went through the list and I go, why am I not surprised? But that's the way it is. Some people's, let's just say, some inquiring minds really always want to know how to basically get in there and find out what you're talking about so they can guard their ass or invest or do something or a deke or so as I say to the ladies and gentlemen out there that I have made a remark to with regard to all these things, I am a very legitimate, very credible guy, and there is a very big project out there in the background with some very respected, credible people, but we're keeping at arm's length and distance right now because I helped architect and engineer and oversee as far as a business model. They're relatively on an environmental criteria, all these things, atmospherics, global warming, blah, 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 on specific paradigms, and certainly work and basically a garbage cleanup and basically a political progression as far as agreements and that on the thing that basically creates a cooperative, progressive, growing détente for a thing for numerous regions of the world, third world development on a significant criterion that was all accredited. Well, there it is, and everybody's kind of keeping their fingers crossed, but in the meantime, there's a lot of interference by a whole bunch of people that really don't love me too much, that provocatively, coincidentally, are all tied in with a whole bunch of stuff that right now are just trying, gosh, so darn hard to keep pitching that other stuff. And I've been holding to them account, and they keep looking the other way, but a lot of them, well, fair enough, they got in, they got over their head, they got deked by the shiny object kind of thing, and opportune and clear concept about getting into thinking, figuring it would be a good deal. Then they were in too far, and all of a sudden they're in a situation where I basically got to basically pitch this deal, or somebody's going to pitch me somewhere or take a pitchfork, and oh gosh, and that's the victimization and the scaries about AI, externals, and a whole bunch of patterns and that I, because of my INFJ personality type, we have a sixth sense. We don't read minds or intuitives, but essentially, as far as things, it has been proven we have a subconscious ability to pick up and make note of patterns and things that become aware and apparent on a highly intuitive and repetitive and very accurate, consistent basis. And over my life and that, I've seen these things happen, but 2 days ago when I put that audio to have video together, I was somewhat consternated because, my Lord, it's got to be so obvious at this point, but at any rate, for the people out on Instagram that I have been just newly locating and saying hello to, that's the deal. I'm okay, I'm fine, but yes, there it is again, my contact information, simple thing. If you are interested in discussing any of the details of any business that I have said, what I say and consistently say and claim, it is always as it is. I can always provide references, and they are who they are. And as far as the prior talents, as I have the performances and the associations I have with regard to successful numbers, marketing formats, design criterias, internet programs, market, essentially, here's the deal. I know my stuff, and I've worked for some big people, and essentially, if you want to have somebody get in contact with me, go through, as I mentioned, I will leave my location. I would recommend, as far as an email, to either email a close member of Parliament or an MLA with my email, your email. You can locate their email or the police department, and as well as that, at that point, ask them to basically contact me to verify, and at that point, they can come and send it to me or let me know about it, and at that point, as I say, we can conduct business, and we will basically set up on an app system that is encrypted through security systems that nobody gets their hands on except highly secured things, and the nice thing, once it's done, it's got a wiping program in it that basically goes through and nothing's left on it that even if you can open it up is there to be found. And as well as that, as far as the thing and the cleanup and basically coming in, well, in the background, there's a basically a trace and a rewipe if it does kind of get out and go some other places on the way back and between each other. So at that point, that's the best I can do. But as I say, to keep things real, and so that the advantageous in an unscrupulous regard, whether they're basically just set up to extort, or basically have something on you, or obligate, or basically live on pretense, or set up and interfere with market share, or things, or a bump around that is a restriction, and a violation of law, and a litany of laws and that over time, because of these things that I've been handing off as investigations, right point out of it was there is an optimism about it because enough people have seen suggestions as far as broad sweeping criteria and kind of neighborhood watch when it's incoming and that, and you see in criteria, it will possibly become self-regulating because nobody dares do what. Because once it comes in, possibly apps will be equipped that you load in, and basically incoming and how it kind of gets fed and basically referenced, and on the way back out, where it goes, and basically if it's blocked and skipped, gets traced back, wiped, and hopefully maybe even reported, and at that point everybody's going to kind of stop doing these things, and all these provocative, highly questionable cross-integrated software systems that run through most of the social media apps and a whole bunch of other things, and large oligarchs, and some highly coincidental things about meteoric rises of profits and this, that, and thing that are contradictory to the actual success of the futility of the technology in terms against the claims and all these things that scientifically criteria and I and some numerous others that are scientists and basically over the years, not degreed in anyways, but as I say, if you want to basically investigate and say, in terms of what you're saying here, how do you say this? How do you substantiate that? Fine. Allow me. Here's the bibliograph file. Here's the references. Here's the qualified academics, the Nobel Peace Prize winners, the former heads of the United Nations Environmental Council, physics, biophysics, and education as PhDs, and blah, blah, blah. And highest notable authority in atmospherics, biometeorology, and ionization, the basic building block of the world and the source of flux dynamics in the first place. And all those things that many, many years ago I had the equivalent of an engineering professor, a technical proficiency as far as assessment, designs, and criteria with regard to buildings and things like that. But being in sales and marketing and just moving around because one thing tends to, I could get into it and then it becomes boring. Well, that's all there is. Let's do something new. So another science, another technology, another field of industry and evaluations, demographics, go out and pitch and justify the sale. And over the years, a couple of years in university, but just because I went out, I certainly didn't stop learning or basically assessing and basically moving and effectively doing introductions, marketing, front-end work, and yes, consistently over time, often 2 and 3 times as more successful than the sales average or the group. And why would I do that? Because I always paid attention for many years after a lady when I was about 22 years old sitting in an open house in real estate in Canada. She was a war bride that had come back from Britain in the late 70s with her husband to disperse of some property. I was sitting around in the house at the open house, and her husband and I were shooting some billiards downstairs. And yes, and at any rate, she says, young man, you know what the big thing is in Britain these days? It's the big thing. It's not just sales and put it on the shelf, but she says it's marketing. And she said, it doesn't matter what you do, kid, or a plumber, or a real estate, or a policeman, or a guy out doing whatever. She says, get into marketing. Take a little bit of that because they found that no matter what you are, you always should have an ability to assess the dynamics, the marketplace, and justify your worth or evaluate whether it's worth your time. At that point, I became a marketing junkie in the evenings. Always have been, always will be. I have not got massive sales records. I am not successful beyond blah, 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 blah. But in the one criteria, I've worked with the top most successful people in those industries over time. And when I have, they're very pleased and they all say, this guy really knows his stuff. But for one thing and another, it was always new products and I'd move along. But the thing is, As far as my criteria, yes, I can always justify and show dynamics that always work, and the big guys always take it to heart, and they say this and that, and I learn studiously. I research different criteria on the truth, based on fact, on proven paradigms that are ethical, blah, 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 that allow a person to sensibly make a decision on the facts and benefits. Does it make sense or not? And if it does, here's why, before you basically take a risk on it. But what's my claim to fame on that? I'll give you my references if you want to get a hold of, or if you have a question, you name it, I'll do my best in the course of a conversation to let you kind of have a feel for whether it might be worth the money that you might pay for the value of what you get. You can have a look at it and say there, and maybe contingent upon, well, fine, I'll take a small percentage as the value becomes apparent, or whatever. But on the other side of it, on the 45 years of selling anything from the time I was, well, make it 50 years or 55 years. I was selling polished rocks at a rock stand when I was 15 or something, or stuff up until just about anything and everything from one end of the criteria of technology to the other. Not one complaint or report ever or violation to the Better Business Bureau or Consumer or Corporate Affairs, period. And that is the truth. And why? Not because I'm shifty or sly or tricky in that and get away with things. It's just that when they go through with me with a fine-tooth comb, as some have desperately tried for the last several years to get something on me, they can't find anything, and they can go, that guy must be really sneaky, and he's got it hidden away, it's just got to be. No. But basically, sometimes the people that have those suspicions of others as a predominance, that's because that's what they're up to. And oh, those clever, sneaky devils, say it isn't so. At any rate, have a blessed day and keep the faith. Personally, I think it's better than the alternative, even though it seems those other guys kind of shows that crime kind of really does pay for a lot of those guys. It's really paying real well, but at the same time, it's better to be able to have some peace of mind and look at a person square in the mirror, especially yourself or whatever, and keep it to a minimum of the people you have to look over your shoulder when you're walking away from some of the crowd that you just prefer not to deal with, or the ones that maybe might not be a bad idea just to check the rearview mirror anyways, in case they might be watching to see what you're up to next as far as stealing your market share or your copyrights. Or we got to get that guy out of the marketplace. He's just too darn good and competitive, and he's giving us a bad reputation because he does things better than us, and we don't know why, but what we're doing, I mean, we got all the angles and slick and tricks we can, and he still seems to sell more. What's going on? Oh, that's just terrible. Yes, it is. Well, they should, instead of basically trying to get me out by continuing with that, is maybe pay attention and follow some of the examples of the people and the people that I act and react with and try to contact through such things as social media on a similar criteria me, because essentially I don't really like shifty people, and it tends not to pay off in the meantime, in the long term. But at any rate, in the meantime, my best regards. For those that don't really love me too much for what I'm saying, well, that's fine, but at the same time, I'm indifferent about it. But at any rate, even though it's not love me too much or some funny way of showing it, thanks for the thought. In the meantime, best regards. I truly appreciate it. This is Lynn Johnson and the Tennis Flea Stud, or the Heaven Sent Butterfly. That's about a poem I wrote about a pretty girl many years ago. Maybe in my case, because I'm always out having coffee and saying hello and being friendly, just for it makes more sense to be friendly. And if I give you a compliment, well, what sense does that not make? It's sure better than insulting you, but these days, any excuse will serve somebody that just doesn't have anything else better, and they're so upset about the way the world is that there's any excuse to just basically express their dissatisfaction that they're unhappy. But that's why I'm trying to be friendly and complimentary. Kind of makes sense to me, but a lot of things don't in this world from the people that are in charge and making it that way. At any rate, draw your own conclusions. In the meantime, if I'm out being around as opposed to the Heaven Sent Butterfly, you can just refer to me as the Heaven Sent Gadfly instead. With that, I'll be flying along. Best regards.